So, you want to own a duck boat. You have seen one. Everybody has. A strange square vehicle, full of tourists, driving down a normal street, past normal traffic, and then straight into a lake without stopping. It is one of the few machines on Earth that gets applause just for existing. And here is what makes it interesting for us. Unlike almost everything else in this series, the duck boat is a genuine, proven, high-volume business, not a hobby. Tour operators have run these for decades in cities all over the world, selling tickets by the 100,000. So why is the industry smaller now than it was 10 years ago? That is the real story, and it is not a simple one, because a duck boat is not one vehicle. It is two welded together, and the economics of owning one comes down to a single uncomfortable fact. Everything that makes it earn money also doubles what can go wrong. This is the full ledger. Where these machines come from, what they cost, the tourism business built on top of them, the double regulatory burden that no other tour vehicle carries, the accidents that changed the industry permanently, and the honest answer about whether this is a business worth being in today. Start with the machine. The buy-in. Start with where it comes from. A wartime design. An amphibious truck, built in enormous numbers during the Second World War, intended to carry supplies from ships onto beaches where there were no ports. Around 21,000 were produced. It was never meant to last. It was a wartime expedient, built to a wartime standard, expected to be used hard and discarded. After the war, they were surplus, cheap, and everywhere. And in the late 1940s, somebody in Wisconsin worked out that a vehicle which drives into a lake is not just transport. It is a ride. Tourists will pay to be on it, precisely because the moment of entering the water is genuinely delightful. That was the whole idea, and it worked for 70 years. Worth pausing on how unusual that is. Most surplus military hardware found civilian work by being useful in the boring sense. Trucks hauled things. Jeeps went where roads did not. But nobody paid extra to watch a truck haul something. This vehicle was different because the transition itself, the moment the wheels leave the ramp and the hull takes the weight, is the product. You are not selling transport. You are selling a specific 30 seconds that people remember. Now, the market today. There are essentially three things you can buy. An original wartime hull, restored or unrestored. A heavily rebuilt original, where very little of the wartime vehicle remains beyond the shape. Or a modern purpose-built amphibious tour vehicle, designed from scratch to current standards. Prices span an enormous range, and here, the pattern will be familiar. A tired original with corrosion is cheap. A commercially operating, inspected, certified vehicle with a survey behind it is worth many multiples of that. A new build amphibious vehicle costs what a serious piece of commercial equipment costs. But the purchase price is genuinely the least interesting number in this file, and for a reason that is unique to this asset. Because what you are actually buying is permission to operate two completely different kinds of vehicle at once. Think about that carefully. On land, it is a road vehicle. It needs registration, roadworthiness, a licensed driver, and it must satisfy road safety rules. In the water, it is a passenger vessel. It falls under marine regulation, needs inspection as a vessel, needs a licensed mariner in charge, and must carry the safety equipment a passenger boat carries. Not one or the other. Both. At the same time, forever. And the two systems were not designed with each other in mind. Road rules assume a vehicle stays on roads. Marine rules assume a vessel stays on water. A machine that does both lands in the overlap, where a requirement written for one environment can sit awkwardly against a requirement written for the other. Operators spend real time and real money resolving that overlap, and none of that work is visible to the person buying a ticket. There is no other tour vehicle on Earth that carries that burden. A tour bus is a bus. A harbor cruise boat is a boat. A duck boat is audited as both, and it can be stopped by either. So the honest way to think about the purchase is this. You are not buying a vehicle. You are buying entry into two separate compliance systems, each of which can shut you down independently, on a machine that in many cases was designed during a war for a job it was supposed to do once. What you inherit. Take delivery, and here is the reality of the asset. First, you inherit water and metal. which is the oldest bad marriage in this entire series. Every episode about ships has said the same thing, and it is just as true at this scale. A hull that spends its life going in and out of water, often fresh water, sometimes salt, is under permanent attack. Corrosion is not an event. It is a condition. On a vehicle built from a wartime design, the areas that corrode are frequently the areas that are hardest to inspect. That matters enormously, and we will come back to it. Second, you inherit a dual maintenance program. Road running gear, brakes, steering, suspension, tires, all wearing on land. And marine systems, pumps, seals, propulsion, and hull integrity, all wearing in the water. 2 sets of parts, 2 skill sets, often 2 different workshops. Third, you inherit crew requirements that are more complex than any tour bus. Depending on jurisdiction and the specific operation, you may need someone qualified to drive it on the road and someone qualified to operate it as a vessel. Strict rules about passenger briefings and safety equipment. Fourth, you inherit the season. This is a tourism business, and in most locations that means a concentrated window. A short number of months carries the entire year, exactly like the cannery and the amusement pier. Your fixed costs run 12 months. Your revenue arrives in about 5. Fifth, you inherit a fleet requirement, which surprises people. One duck boat is not really a business. Tour operations need enough vehicles to run a schedule, absorb a breakdown, and handle peak demand without turning customers away. So, the entry cost is rarely one vehicle. It is several, plus a workshop, plus a ticket office, plus staff. Sixth, you inherit insurance, and this is now one of the defining costs of the whole industry. We will get to why. It is worth flagging early that this single line has done more to shape who operates today than any market force. When cover becomes expensive, marginal operators exit. When it becomes difficult to obtain at any price, even competent operators can find themselves unable to run a season that was otherwise fully booked. And seventh, you inherit a public. Every passenger is a member of the public, on a vehicle, on a road, and then on water. That is a different risk profile from every other asset in this series, and it is the thing that has reshaped this business more than any economic force. The revenue layers. So how does it earn? And the honest answer is that it earns well, which is why the industry existed at scale for so long. Layer 1 is ticket volume, and it is almost the whole business. A tour lasts somewhere around an hour. The vehicle carries a busload of people on several tours a day, across a season, across a fleet. This is a volume business with a fixed asset, which means the maths is beautifully simple and brutally unforgiving. Every seat sold above your break-even point is close to pure margin. Every empty seat is gone forever because you cannot store an unsold tour, which puts enormous weight on scheduling. Run too few tours, and you leave demand unserved on your best days. Run too many, and you burn fuel, wages, and vehicle hours carrying half-empty boats. Good operators watch the queue the way a restaurant watches its covers, adjusting departure frequency through the day. And that skill is worth more to the bottom line than almost any other operational detail. Anything mechanical, Layer 2 is the location premium. Duck tours cluster in cities where there is water next to a downtown worth seeing. That combination is rare, and where it exists, the operator often has very little direct competition, because you cannot simply add a second amphibious tour route to a city that only has one sensible entry ramp. That is a genuine moat. Not the vehicle, the route. And routes are not created by capital. They require a downtown worth touring, a body of water beside it, a ramp that a local authority will let you use repeatedly, and traffic conditions that let a slow, amphibious vehicle move safely through a city. Most cities fail at least one of those tests. Where all 4 line up, the operator who established the arrangement first is very difficult to displace, no matter how much money a competitor arrives with. Layer 3 is group and private charter. Schools, corporate events, weddings, tour operators buying blocks of seats. This smooths demand and fills weekday capacity that retail tickets would leave empty. Layer 4 is merchandise and the quacking. And yes, this is a real revenue line. Souvenir items sold on board and at the ticket booth carry high margins and require almost no additional infrastructure. Layer 5 is advertising and partnership. The vehicles are extremely visible, moving billboards driving through a downtown all day. Some operators sell that space, others trade it with hotels and attractions for referral arrangements. Underneath all five is a number that decides everything. Listen to that again. Here's the thing about this business that took me longest to understand. A duck boat is the cheapest part of a duck boat operation. That vehicle, the actual amphibious machine that people queue up to ride, is a minor line in the accounts of a real operator. What costs money is the operation around it. The ticket office and its staff, the workshop and its mechanics, the road compliance, the marine compliance, the captain and driver qualifications, the insurance, the route arrangements, the seasonal marketing. A person who buys one duck boat has bought a very expensive novelty. A person who builds a duck boat operation has bought a business with 2 regulators, a 5-month earning window, and a fleet to maintain. This is why almost nobody owns one privately. A vehicle without the operation has no purpose, and the operation is where all of the cost and all of the difficulty lives. There is a small exception worth mentioning because it is genuinely charming. A few collectors do own restored wartime amphibious vehicles, and they take them to military vehicle shows and beach events and the occasional parade. Those owners are doing something entirely different from a tour operator. They are preserving a piece of history. They accept the cost as the price of that, and they have no illusion that the vehicle will ever pay for itself, which, as this series keeps demonstrating, is a far healthier relationship with an old machine than most people manage. The ledger. Vehicle maintenance doubled because it is 2 vehicles, hull inspection and survey on a marine schedule, road registration and roadworthiness compliance, marine inspection and certification with everything that implies, crew wages and qualification maintenance, including licensed mariners, insurance, which for passenger-carrying amphibious operations is now a very significant cost and in some markets difficult to obtain at all, fuel, moderate compared to most of this series, but continuous during the season, ticket office, staffing, and point of sale, marketing, heavily concentrated before and during the season, storage and winterization, because in most locations, the fleet sits for months, ramp access and route arrangements, which may involve municipal agreements, and a contingency, because a vehicle that carries the public in 2 environments generates inspection findings that must be fixed immediately, not scheduled. Add it up, and the seasonal nature becomes the defining pressure. Every one of those costs continues through the winter. Only tickets stop. That pattern shapes every decision a tour operator makes. It is why they push so hard on advance bookings, because money taken in February funds the workshop that keeps the fleet ready for May. It is why group and corporate sales matter more than the ticket price suggests. And it is why a single bad season does more damage here than in a business that earns evenly, because there is no quiet quarter in which to recover. You get one run at the year. The trap. This trap is not financial. It is structural, and it is the reason this episode exists. Design is old, and risk sits in the parts you cannot see. A wartime amphibious vehicle was built to be operated by trained military crews for short periods in wartime conditions, and then discarded. It was not designed to carry paying members of the public for 70 years. Specific concerns that safety investigators have raised over the years include hull integrity on aging vehicles, the difficulty of inspecting internal structure for corrosion, the speed with which an amphibious vehicle can take on water if integrity is lost, and the design of canopies and their effect on evacuation. Those are not abstract engineering points. They are the exact factors that turned this from a thriving industry into a contracting one. When the industry changed, 3 events matter, and they deserve to be stated plainly and without drama, because people died in all of them. In 1999, a duck boat sank on a lake in Arkansas. 13 people lost their lives. Investigators examined the vehicle's condition and the circumstances of the sinking, and made recommendations about the safety of these vehicles carrying passengers. In 2015, a duck boat in Seattle was involved in a collision on a bridge. 5 people lost their lives. The investigation examined a mechanical failure and the maintenance practices around it. In 2018, a duck boat sank on a lake in Missouri during a severe storm. 17 people lost their lives, including members of the same family. It was one of the deadliest tourism accidents in recent American history. I am not going to dramatize any of that. Those investigations are public and the findings are detailed, and anyone who wants to understand them properly should read them rather than watch a video about economics. What this video can tell you is what happened to the business afterwards. That operator involved in the Missouri accident ceased duck boat operations permanently. Regulatory scrutiny of amphibious passenger vehicles intensified substantially. Safety authorities repeated long-standing recommendations about vehicle design, reserve buoyancy, and canopy configuration. Some operators in other cities suspended or ended operations. Insurance for amphibious passenger vehicles became far more expensive, and for some operators, much harder to obtain. And public perception shifted, which in a tourism business is not a small thing. Tourism runs on a family looking at an activity and deciding it is a nice afternoon. Anything that makes that decision hesitate has a direct revenue effect. That industry did not disappear. Operations continue in several cities today, run by companies that have invested heavily in modern vehicles, revised procedures, and compliance. But the industry is smaller, the barrier to entry is far higher, and the cost of being in it has risen permanently. That is the honest economic picture, and pretending otherwise would be useless to anybody actually considering this. How the survivors do it. So who is still operating, and what do they do differently? First, and most significantly, many have moved to modern purpose-built amphibious vehicles rather than rebuilt wartime hulls. That is a much larger capital cost, and it is the single clearest dividing line in this industry now. Second, they treat compliance as the core of the business rather than an obligation attached to it. 2 regulators means 2 sets of relationships, 2 audit trails, and a genuine safety management system. Operators who survived were generally the ones already doing this before they had to. Third, they own the route. Their moat is a good downtown loop with a reliable ramp and a municipal relationship, and the operators with that position have something a competitor cannot simply buy. Fourth, they manage the season aggressively. Advanced sales, group bookings, partnerships with hotels and attractions, and a marketing spend concentrated exactly where it converts. A 5-month window punishes anyone who is passive about demand. Fifth, they run a fleet, not a vehicle. Redundancy is not a luxury when a breakdown means turning away a queue of paying customers on your best weekend of the year. Sixth, they are conservative about weather. That Missouri accident occurred during a severe storm, and across the industry, the practical response has been a much lower tolerance for marginal conditions. Canceling a tour costs a few hundred tickets. Anything else is not comparable in any way. Seventh, and this is quieter, the operators who lasted have generally been in one place for a long time. They know the water. They know the weather patterns. They know which afternoons turn bad, and they have relationships with the local authorities who regulate them. In a business where judgment calls are made daily, and the consequences of a wrong one are severe, local knowledge accumulated over decades is not sentimentality. It is an operating asset that a newcomer cannot purchase at any price. The verdict: so should you own a duck boat? If you mean the vehicle alone, as a private curiosity, the answer is that you will have bought a large, thirsty, difficult-to-store machine that needs marine and road maintenance and gives you nothing back. A restored one is a wonderful object and a poor asset. If you mean the business, then the honest answer is that this is a real, proven, and genuinely profitable model that now sits behind a much higher wall than it used to. Here is the good year. You operate modern vehicles on an established route in a city with strong tourism. Season starts early and runs late. Advanced bookings and group sales fill the weekdays. Weather cooperates. Compliance costs are high but predictable. Insurance renews without a shock, and the fleet runs the whole season without an unscheduled failure. Volume does what volume does in a fixed-cost business, and the margins in the back half of the season are excellent. Now the bad year. A wet season kills weekend demand. An insurance renewal arrives at a number nobody forecast. An inspection finding takes a vehicle out during peak weeks. A national news story about an incident somewhere else involving an operator you have never met softens bookings across the entire category. And every fixed cost keeps running through a winter that earns nothing. Same vehicles, same route. What separates them is weather, insurance, and public confidence. And you control exactly one of those 3. Thesis close. Every other asset in this series is one thing. A tank is a tank. A bomber is a bomber. Even a battleship, for all its complexity, is a ship. A duck boat is two machines sharing one hull, and it has to be perfect as both at the same time, with the public on board in a vehicle whose ancestor was built to cross a beach once and then be abandoned. For 70 years that worked, and it made money, and it delighted an enormous number of people. What changed is not the economics. Tickets still sell. Route is still a moat. The margins in a good season are still real. What changed is that the industry finally priced the thing it had been carrying all along.